Interesting kind of formation here at the end of the day, but it's past 12:30, so not interested in taking any trades. Wasn't sure what's going on here. I think it was a spiking channel with an overshoot, but uh, kind of tough to tell here at this point of the day.
Are you talking about the final few hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same. I wasn't sure if it was overshoot or not.
The only thing I was thinking, so I was just kind of following this because like the slope of this EMA, right, kind of fits along kind of this general up movement, right?
I don't think
But
you're streaming on here on Discord.
oh, sorry,
Which
I had set up the um, I set the YouTube. See, I got too many things running now. All right, can you see the screen
there
now?
we go. Um, yeah.
Okay. So generally, um, so I kind of two schools of thought here at the end. One was, kind of following this move. You kind of see this slope, right? Like the EMA is kind of holding right there in the middle, so that's why I thought maybe it's kind of
Yep.
something like that. But there was a part of me that was thinking, well, it was odd that this move never got a retest, right?
Yep.
So it could very well be something more along the lines of like a that, right? We're trying to make
Gotcha.
that fit to where, you know, there was rejection here, right?
Sure.
Because this move down, we should have gotten at least some type of retest. It didn't look like it rejected off the EMA, so it may be something more like that. Actually, now that I have it drawn like that, I think I'm going to stick with that. But anyways, did anyone here on the call see anything that they saw today or took? I didn't take anything. This is my first day back, um, so I wasn't being too aggressive with things. But just curious if anyone saw anything they took or wanted to discuss from today's chart.
Um, I took the triple test about 10 minutes after the open, which I thought was a decent trade. Uh, Dan ended up marking it blue.
Oh,
I'm not sure if he took it or not. But
here.
the interesting one was actually the uh, higher low afterwards at the top of the range.
The higher low at the top. I mean, the lower high.
There, that big red candle.
This one, yeah.
Yeah,
So, okay, I guess on that, I think this is a good trade. In the sense, I think this is kind of, to kind of even relate it back to what we talked about with Dan last Friday on that group call. This is one of those where, you're kind of just finding the support after a move, right? So you have this move down. This overnight move kind of sucks. But then you have this move up, and then after you find this kind of support, right? And I personally am going to be more aggressive with this style of setup going forward, right? I think the counter argument that I think we can all see is that we can make the argument that it's a bit congested all up in here, right? Um, I think, you know, Taylor, I've been poking him ahead of the Discord. I think Taylor used a kind of good term, and it's like this whole concept of a sliding scale, right? Where it's almost yes, there are times to skip this trade because of congestion, but I think the support here is strong enough to where the support outweighs the congestion. So it's kind of one of those things where, in certain scenarios, the way it sets up is going to be too congested. But I think in this case, right, where we have some room to this midline, I would almost argue that this congestion almost kind of proves the midline. So I don't mind this trade at all. Is there anyone else in the call who has anything that they would like to comment on that?
Yeah, RJ, I also took it,
Yeah.
but I did have the uptrend wider, which I don't think turned out to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the reason I thought it was a solid triple test for the most part, but also, when you get these clean two legs, how do you know when they're wider and when it's just
Yeah.
like even the next one you do have a wider, but I don't know, maybe that one's not correct. I don't know if there's any clean criteria to know, when you can have it wider or not. But I still like the trade. Okay, no matter what, I took it. I was happy with it.
Yeah.
The price was moving really, really fast at the time. You had to be quick.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't trading at the open. I think the only additional comment I would make is, in this situation, we do have each push. So you have from up here, right? This first test, it comes up to this high, or to the top of our range. And the second one comes up to the middle, right? So we're getting progressively lower, right? Which is something to be mindful of. But this is kind of where, I think if there was one main takeaway from our call last Friday with Dan, I think it was last time I talked to you guys, was, it's price actions really about a very small number of basic concepts that just, when you combine them all, it sounds like it's like almost infinite things to be paying attention to, right? But they're all kind of iterations of the same thing. And sometimes we just need to simplify it by the fact that, okay, this is the dominant footing here, right? Prices have found a footing. There's something supporting it, right? And if there was a lack of other things going on, I think, Robert, to your point, where we didn't really have a solid trend down here, right? We didn't really have a solid trend coming up, whether it's wider, whether it's shorter, right? So that kind of proves that I guess, maybe for lack of a better term, the smaller game in town has more of an effect on the market, right? It's all about, Dan's all about how prices get to a certain point and where they find their footing, right? And what may be applicable in one scenario may not be applicable in the next, right? But I think this is a good example of prices really finding its footing on one area when there's a complete lack of other things to be concerned about at this point, right? Like Fahim said, this lower high is relatively interesting. I think if you play it as this is the first test over here, right? And I think if you combine it with the fact that we've had a triple test here on the bottom, this almost validates this next test right here. I do like this one. I think calling this first test is a little aggressive, but overall, I do like this setup as well. This is one I'm going to try to be a little bit more aggressive on in the future as well. I don't know if you know, Dan likes taking these lower highs in certain scenarios. Was there anything anyone else saw on this one that they want to comment on, or?
Yeah, just at that time, I didn't have the range extended to the left like Husey, so I was seeing it as a double test.
Yeah.
But I think when you do extend it, I think that's totally valid, and you can see that is an attempt at that point, that green bar to the left, that is an attempt to go higher. So I think you could quite easily count that as a triple test, but I wasn't seeing it as a triple test at the time, so I kind of skipped it. But I think it looked really good, actually.
And I think what's important to note about this one is as long as you have room to the EMA in the midline, right? And you barely do in this situation. But
Yep.
this is a pretty strong sign of rejection here, right? Where it's, you have prices moving in twos up, and then when it tries to make the third leg, it's almost like the market saying, no, this line is strong, right? So, and it's one of those things. I think you're right, Fahim. Without this form of resistance up here, it's pretty aggressive, but it's almost kind of saying, okay, we have the two legs, we have the lower high, plus we are showing signs that this line is holding. And you can even make the kind of the sub argument that the fact that this is holding down here as well, that it's, range principles can apply on the opposite side as well, you know? I do think now I'm just looking at this will be marked. I don't know if I would take that in that scenario, but I believe that would be marked just since Mac marks every second entry. Did anyone take this one?
No, I had a STT in play.
Yeah, I was planning to take that one too, actually, but that range high, sometimes it does go test that one. So I was a little bit hesitating, wondering if, if that one's gonna be like 2 ES and there's an LH happen, I will on the EMA, I will definitely take it.
Yeah.
But I was hesitating on that one if kind of like test the support resistance. Usually if there's a range, there's a support resistance. So no, not, I was planning because of that tip STT down,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, okay, I can wait. There's more trade coming in.
Yeah, and I think the couple things just to be cautious of is, one is if we're validating this range up here, we need to be careful that we are going to get caught in a failed breakout, right? I know Mac has said in the past, whenever we take a trade that's after a range, I think he even mentioned a video like a week or two ago where he was saying he really wants to have a solid, like you mentioned, like a lower high or triple test or something outside of the range before he even considers taking it. I just think that in the grand scheme of things, right, you have the breakout of this range, you have this move down, a second entry that's this small, right, that already retraces that much in the signal bar with, just enough points to get out, is something to be cautious of, right? Especially not making it back to the EMA. And just, kind of using this a little bit more of a kind of a secondary reason, but, we've had this overnight move down, we've had this move up, we're not really getting very convincing signs of we're getting the breaks and the new highs and new lows. That makes this one a little aggressive to me. This, I know there was one talk about this middle channel, right? Full disclosure, if Mac hadn't posted, I definitely would have played it as two separate legs, right? As a move up, break, and a retest leg. But I think we've talked about this in the past where at the beginning of a move, right, Mac will often mark this initial slope, right? And then he'll pay attention if you get an additional retest off the first swing. So even if you have this baby 1, 2, 3 in the beginning, he'll have that, and then he'll just be waiting to see if you get the retest off of it at a later point, which we do. Does anyone have anything on that? I think this is relatively, a sign of the fact that, okay, this is as much as, you don't want to overthink the previous price action. The fact that we've had nothing that predictable up until this point kind of says, okay, even though we're drawing like this, it doesn't have a huge effect on what we're trying to do, if that makes sense. If the trends aren't strong, right, and they're not holding well, we're then looking for patterns and support resistance areas. So there's a hidden second entry here, although that's a tough one to trust. I would say don't even look at that if you don't have a good sense of this kind of early concept. Was there anything in this general area that anyone want to talk about?
Yeah, I've been playing that like the big range you have
Yeah.
there as well. Yeah, I was if let's say the 2EL happened to be like a good leg, that one right there. Yeah. If kind of like not a good straight ones, I'm not gonna take it. But if it's kind of like an obvious like a visual 2EL, then yeah, I definitely would take that one. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. So yeah, and I'm kind of like checking as well that your first SDT up and like a new high now. But yeah, I'm playing that big uptrend as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think one thing to kind of take note on that is, if we're not getting these kind of clean trend lines, I think trend lines is probably the most important, or one of the most important tools that we have. It's also incredibly important to recognize when they're not holding well, right? And I don't know if you guys have probably noticed, if we go through Dan's charts, which we'll on another chart lesson when we have more time, it's almost like if the trend lines aren't holding well, Dan especially is then really looking for support and resistance, right? Because even if the trend lines aren't holding well, that also means most times the STTs aren't holding well. So it's more prices. You're looking for more obvious signs of rejection off certain key entry points, right? I think one really interesting area was pretty much from, was it 7 to about 8:30 here, so this hour and a half. I think this entire area was incredibly difficult to trade. So much of it is revealed more in hindsight, but as much as this, we can obviously look at its congestion, right? I think this trade right here confuses and trips up traders more often than not. This is not a great example because it's pretty obviously congested and sideways, right? But when we have a break, right, and we take the second entry off of it, I know that a lot of traders are looking for, especially you can call this a second entry long to a higher low for the retest of this. I know that will trip up a lot of traders. The only thing I really can say on this is that Dan has mentioned that when he sees kind of like this curving action, he's often looking for it to be a possible center of the pattern, right? Which in this case it is, right? Did anyone have any questions on this general area or, this kind of sound? I think there was a couple things I saw on the Discord on it, but not too much. I do think, and I saw this earlier, I'm very curious to see if Mac marks this one. I didn't see much activity on Discord on it, but this looks like the kind of trade that Mac would mark that I don't know if I would have the guts to take. Did anyone see anything in Discord if anyone took this one or had any questions about it?
Oh yeah, that's really a tempting one, but no. For me, it was just kind of like overall congestion. So
yeah.
That's it.
It's one of those things. It's kind of like what I call it. It's like know your surroundings, right? Like you have so much indecision from every single other move this one's a tough one to take, just because you're relying on a key entry point to hold when a key entry point really hasn't held all day. I mark this one down here. Didn't trigger on the first pass, but I think Mac will mark it. Simple, trend down, break, 2 legs to a new low. Even if you don't want to call it a trend, this is, a move down, break, new low, far away from the EMA. I think Mac marks that at least a green. This one, I was very tempted, but there was just so much. I was pretty much just waiting on just the next formation, right? I felt like this was so much of a transitional area that I don't know if this needs a retest. I don't know if this is valid. I don't know anything going on. So therefore, the only time I would really take this is if I had like room to the EMA, right? Or if this had completely flattened out, which it never fully did, right? Not saying this is a trend, but it's just on every swing you're making lower lows or lower highs and lower lows. This is a tough one for me to take. I know some people took this one. Did anyone on the call take this one right here?
I marked it, but I couldn't take it. It just felt a little bit too congested at the start for me, and I
Yeah.
just wasn't 100% sure which way it was going.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, you go back and read Mac's manual. The prices are making lower lows and lower highs. It's not a great time to go long, right? I would definitely say this is a good example, though, of this is just chop, right? Like when we talk about lower lows and lower highs and the trend versus lower lows and lower highs and chop, this is pretty choppy all the way down, right? This one was interesting. I had a discussion with someone in the Discord about it. I think if you draw it like this, you can make the argument for it. So versus one like over here, when you have this kind of higher low this far from the EMA, I feel you're almost, I don't want to use the word guaranteed. You feel pretty good about making this back to the EMA, right? Truthfully, if this bar would have finished probably a half tick higher, I would have been in that probably for sure. It's just a little bit, it's just like neutral enough in that situation to where I have some hesitation, right? But I think we can all see the actual setup here, right? Where we're in this continued mixed trading, right? We finally break out of it and have a mini trend up with an overshoot, have this mini trend down, right, with a potential break and new low. Even if you draw it like this, you can semi make the argument that it's a close outside, new low, all to one bar. You maybe need one or two more things to make you feel really good about it, but I think principally, at least for people who've been on these calls for the past couple of weeks, can see why we'd be looking for an entry there. I just think you just want one or two other things to be real convincing, right? For example, this is very similar to the short that Dan took yesterday, right? Let me see if I can go grab that real quick. Of course, my internet. I guess while I'm waiting this to load, does anyone else have any comments on that one?
To which one again? Sorry.
This high or low right here.
Oh, I see. I mean, the first one I would definitely take, but it didn't trigger. That's why I canceled my order. But for the second one, kind of hard for me because I mean, feels too steep, and in trading those, I want to see like kind of like an obvious break to a new low.
Yeah.
And then I go for trade. Yeah. I mean, if it's kind of like chopping like that one, in kind of like, I mean, it's hard for me to tell yet because I don't see any like a support to at least kind of like bounce onto. So yeah, I mean that's a hard one for me. I would go for the first one.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where, we talk about things being applicable in certain situations and we need to apply them in other areas, right? Where, Dan has mentioned that oftentimes if we don't get a convincing break, that's a good sign that we're going to get maybe another push down or an actual breakdown, right? So I think if you were to take, just the regular second entry off this, it'd be really, aggressive. The higher low really does help, but it's, similar to this move from yesterday, where you have this move up and you have more of an obvious break to the new high, right? I think that's more of what we're looking for if we want consistent winners, right? I think this is like I said, this was more of a intuition based on a few things, but I think if you are looking really to have, 90% success and winners, it's a tough one to take, right? Because for instance, right, when we look back to here, this trend down really isn't super obvious, right? You can draw it a couple ways. So, I mean, you can even draw it tight like that, even if you want to, right? So, whereas this lower high makes it back to the EMA and you get the second entry short to the bottom, I just feel like this one was in a similar spot. I think the only thing going for it was how far away from the EMA we were, right? The only other thing I had marked, and I only have it marked because I believe that Mac will have it marked. It's sometimes Mac does like marking these where you have the higher low that doesn't exactly, it makes that 2-bar matching next to it, right? So this would just be kind of a short-term trend, break, second entry long, no signal bar, calling this the higher low, even though you have just a 2-bar matching low. But that's all I really saw for the rest of the day. Was there anything that anyone had to discuss that they saw either earlier in the day or later in the day from today's chart? Well, I know I only have like a couple minutes here, and I just wanted to reemphasize for those who were on the group study call on Friday with Dan, right? And some of the questions and things we talked about, because I think really reemphasizes a lot of, things that we've talked about on here, right? And I think of those things, the most important are certain common themes that when Dan is entering trades, he's looking for, right? It's really our prices cleanly moving in twos and our prices finding footing in certain strong areas, right? And sometimes those things happen at the same time. Sometimes they happen and they kind of clash against each other, right? For instance, sometimes we get times where we get a clean move in two to a spot that's like a key entry point or support resistance, right? Sometimes we develop the support and resistance, but we don't get a clean move of two to that area, right? Sometimes we are, getting a clean move in two, but it's not at an area of support and resistance, right? It's really all about where our prices finding its footing. Where our prices finding area, like it's trying to find areas where we're expecting things to turn around, right? And trading off those areas. There was a comment in Discord today about, Mac never really talks about rejection. My argument to that is price action trading as a whole, like the entire thing in itself, is an explanation of rejection, right? Because essentially we are trading where prices are done moving in a certain direction and will start moving in the other direction, right? So as an entire concept, right, PATS is essentially rejection. And we find rejection by, mainly saying, okay, these are areas that we're expecting prices to bounce off of, or we are expecting this pattern to be done, right? And really, Dan does a great job of combining and isolating those concepts. We can talk about this more in depth on the next call, but I really just wanted to reiterate and hope people took away some of the same things that I took away from that call, because a lot of traders, we do this kind of a la carte thing where we're trying to say, oh, key entry, second entries, failures, when is it that? And it's just, no, it's really all about finding where we think prices are going to reject off of if we don't have an area, and finding when the pattern is going to be done. So if no one else has anything topics they want to talk about or any questions, I do got to go in here in a minute or two. So does anyone else have anything else?
None so far for me.
No, that's good. Thank you, RJ.
Yeah, that's a great input. Yeah, thanks, RJ. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. And then I'll write a schedule in for if we are able to do one of these calls for tomorrow.
Oh, are we doing this every day? That would be good.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you're new to this, we do this